The language of feelings. In the Gospel, Jesus demonstrates the full range of human emotions and expresses them in perfect love. Altogether, 39 emotions, unable to name each emotion. So, all these 39 emotions contain these 11 emotions: anxiety, anger, shame, sadness, pain, surprise, hope, faith, love, joy, and peace. Anxiety. Preparing to go to the cross, Jesus prayed with great anxiety that he sweat drops of blood. Luke chapter 22, verses 44. He also felt afraid. Hebrew chapter 15, verses 7. Pressured. Luke chapter 12, verses 50. Troubled. John chapter 11, verses 33. And terrified. Mark chapter 14, verses 33. Anger. Jesus was angry with the Pharisees who opposed him healing the man with a deformed hand on the Sabbath. Mark chapter 2, verses 17. Indignant. Mark chapter 10, verses 14. Furious. Book of Revelation chapter 19, verses 15. Stern displeasure. John chapter 11, verses 33 and 38. Shame. By choice, Jesus experienced a shameful death on the cross for our sins. Hebrew chapter 12, verses 2. He also felt depressed. Mark chapter 14, verses 33, and forsaken. Mark chapter 15 and verses 24. Sadness. From the Mount of Olives, Jesus looked down Jerusalem and wept with sadness. Luke chapter 19, verses 41. He also felt grief. Mark chapter 3, verses 5. Deep sighs. Mark chapter 18, verses 12. Deep distress. Matthew chapter 26, verses 37. Crushing grief. Mark 14, verses 34. And tearful. John chapter 11, verses 35 and 43. Pain. Jesus suffered terrible pain when he was flogged. Mark chapter 15, verses 15. He also felt suffering. Luke chapter 24, verses 26. Hungry. Matthew chapter 4, verses 2. Chapter 21, verses 18. Thirsty. John chapter 19, verses 28. Weary. John chapter 4, verses 6. Surprise. Jesus felt amazed by the faith of the Roman officer. Luke chapter 7, verses 9. He also felt astonished as he prayed to his Abba. Mark chapter 14, verses 33. Hope. Jesus' love for God and us come from his hope. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 7. Faith. Jesus lived by faith in God, showing us how to do it. John chapter 15, verses 12. Paul says, I live by the faith of Christ. Galatians chapter 2, verses 21. Love. Jesus felt genuine love for people like the rich young ruler. Mark 10, verses 21. Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. John chapter 11, verses 5. Washing the feet of his disciples. John chapter 13, verses 1. He also felt friendship. John chapter 11, verses 3. Chapter 20, verses 2. Compassion. Matthew chapter 9, verses 36. Chapter 14, verses 14. Sympathy. Hebrew chapter 4 verses 15. Joy. He was exceedingly joyful when he saw that 72 disciples were able to minister. Luke chapter 10 verses 21. He also felt rejoicing. John chapter 11 verses 15. Glad. John chapter 15 verses 2. 17 verses 13. And thankful. Matthew chapter 11 verses 25. Peace. Jesus felt peace from heaven and shared this with his disciples. John chapter 14 verses 27. He also felt rest. Matthew chapter 11 verses 28. He also felt refreshment. Mark chapter 6 verses 31. If we admire and bond with Jesus, the feeler, then it will help us put more value on the emotions that we and other people have. According to social psychology, emotional intelligence is the key to success in relationships and work, and it begins with self awareness. He was one with us except sin. Sometimes we find it difficult to accept ourselves as we are or to accept others as they are. Let us accept ourselves and our friends. Have a good day, friends.